We're getting clarity on Colorado's closest races and ballot issues. Best part is, nobody behind on votes here is making false claims that they actually won. We'll let you know if any presidential race calls come in during this half hour, but let's focus on our state. Coloradans have now banished Republicans from high office here. Is that healthy? And what's the path back to any kind of relevance for the Colorado GOP? We're closing in on pandemic highs and hospitalizations for COVID-19, and we're seeing deaths begin to rise again. Your unstoppable generosity for Colorado's wildfire victims has a new opportunity tonight, a chance to heal the land blackened by fire and to protect our neighbors who live nearby. All that is next. Election Day 2 in America. Votes are still being counted, which again is totally normal and not at all a vast conspiracy. We're keeping an eye for any changes in the national electoral map in the next 30 minutes while we focus on Colorado, as we do on Next each night. Here's your quick check on that national picture. We are awaiting calls in Nevada and Arizona. Democratic former Vice President Joe Biden has leads in both states that would take him to 270 and the presidency, but NBC News says both states are too close to call right now. President Trump is not out of options, but his path to a second term pretty much relies on a sweep of the remaining states. Following next, it will be Broncos Huddle tonight, and then back to NBC News special election coverage at 7 o'clock, which will continue through 9 tonight. A majority of Coloradans would prefer that we do away with this electoral college messiness and just go to a national popular vote. This was close, a 4-point margin, but Prop 113 has now passed in our state, adds Colorado to the National Popular Vote Compact. Whole lot of money out of California was spent here convincing you that's a good idea. The deal to give our electoral votes to the National Popular Vote winner does not kick in till more states agree. Prop 117 still too close to call. That plan to require voter approval for new state government enterprises of a certain size is another 4-point margin, with the vote leaning in favor. Same margin, same lean on Amendment C, which would loosen the rules for nonprofit bingo raffles for charity. That's what's close in our state. It is closing time for Republicans elected to high office in Colorado. Voters have said to the last of them, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Senator Cory Gardner's double-digit drubbing last night banishes Republicans from every high-profile statewide office in Colorado. And it leaves the state GOP searching for a path back to competitiveness. Here's politics guy Marshall Zellinger.
A statewide Republican race today, the morning after what happened last night, seems really tough.
And that's coming from Colorado's last statewide Republican office holder. Heidi Ganahl won statewide in 2016 to be an at-large CU regent. How would she run a statewide race after the results of last night that currently have Senator Cory Gardner losing by 9 points and President Trump by 13?
We have a lot of soul searching to do and kind of rethinking how we connect with the voters better in the next couple of years before we take that on.
In 2022, Republicans will need candidates to run for governor against Jared Polis and against Democratic Senator Michael Bennet.
One of the lessons, I think, of the Trump era will be let's focus less on personality and more on policy. So I think before we can talk about who, we need to talk about what.
Cole Wist was in leadership for Republicans in the state house before losing his seat representing Arapahoe County in 2018, a local blue trend that continued this election.
After last night's election, Arapahoe County does not have a Republican in the state legislature. Arapahoe County does not have any countywide officials, and it appears that Arapahoe County control is going to go to the Democratic Party. That would have been unheard of 10, 15 years ago.
Donald Trump's unpopularity is going to cause a lot of good, well-intentioned, qualified Republicans to lose their seats.
Conservative-leaning pollster David Flaherty says unaffiliated voters, which make up 41% of Colorado registered voters, get their impression of what a Republican stands for from leaders, who also tend to be the loudest.
I think more conservative Republicans need to allow more moderate Republicans to do their thing and not, punish them or overwhelm them with their own ideas on recalls, on being critical of mask orders.
So what is a Colorado Republican?
Before we can figure out what the party is, I think we've got to learn more about what the electorate is.
At the core of what we are, we're about believing that we as individuals solve problems for ourselves and our families and our businesses better than the government does. I think that's the essence of what we stand for.
When talking about the Colorado Republican, I did not mention Congresswoman-elect Lauren Boebert, who won in the 3rd Congressional District overnight. David Flaherty tells me what worked for her, support of the president, freedom, unapologetic conservatism, works in the 3rd Congressional District. But when you look at that statewide map, Kyle, the red doesn't blend with the metro area, perhaps, for a statewide race.
But you know that there are Republicans clamoring to get Boebert into a statewide race, either for a Senate in 2020 or for governor. Their thought is, forget this moderation business, ride or die, baby.
But look at the blue, and this is shading. If it's a darker blue, that's, in this case, support for John Hickenlooper. That's what you're up against. In the lighter red and the lighter blues, you really have to push through to make them dark red colors. And just this map right now does not look good for that situation.
Bottom line, it's the Republican Party's business. They can make their own choices and decide what they want to do in the future in Colorado. Marshall, thank you. 2 security companies have been cited by the city of Denver for contracting with an unlicensed security guard who's now charged in a fatal shooting during protests last month. At the time, that security guard was working with a 9 News crew. Matthew Dolliff was contracted by Pinkerton to provide security for a 9 News producer at the time when the shooting happened, October 10th. Dolliff was formally charged with second-degree murder in Lee Keltner's death 9 days later. The Denver Department of Excise and Licenses announced today that it has cited both Pinkerton and Isborne Security. Cited them for a municipal code violation for employing or directing an unlicensed security guard. Pinkerton had contracted Dolliff, the guard, from Isborne Security. 9 News management released a public statement today that went to journalists, including those in our newsroom. I'll read it to you here. Quote, Pinkerton, the company 9 News contracted with, is responsible for ensuring the appropriate licensing of its guards or those it contracts with. 9 News does not contract directly with individual security personnel. Statement from management continues. 9 News had directed Pinkerton that security guards accompanying our personnel not be armed, and none of the 9 News crew accompanied by Mr. Dolliff were aware that he was armed. 9 News no longer uses Pinkerton to provide security. Colorado's hospitals are bracing for a record-breaking surge of COVID-19 patients that could exceed our hospital's capacity. Today, the hospitals announced what they're calling a combined hospital transfer center to deal with that influx. This center would be activated when capacity at a hospital is hit so that they could find places for additional patients to go. The state's COVID-19 modeling suggests that we are going to pass April hospitalization highs pretty soon. Our Chris Vanderveen today asked the state's public health leaders if they're considering bringing back stay-at-home orders.
Nobody wants to be at stay-at-home. And so the question, therefore, is what can we do all the way up to, but not crossing over into stay-at-home? Would curfews be something to consider? Would be reducing any events that bring people together in gatherings be something to consider?
So curfews is the suggestion. 847 people are currently hospitalized in Colorado with COVID-19. That is up 33 patients from yesterday, not far from our springtime peak of 888 hospitalizations. Our positivity rate continues to climb, just over 11% now. It brings our weekly average of tests coming back positive to 9.4%, so we're almost double the 5% threshold that's seen as safe. Colorado added 2,600 new cases of COVID-19 yesterday. Look at us climb that mountain. We continue to see daily case numbers almost quadruple what they were during the springtime peak. Now, a lot of that has to do with increased testing, and that's why we primarily focus on hospitalizations to identify the worst cases. What do you say we talk about something that is not politics or COVID, shall we? Let's talk about how you are changing Colorado for the better. You've raised $700,000 for our neighbors impacted by wildfires. And this week, we have a chance for us to help heal the land and to protect the Coloradans who live in the shadows of those enormous burn areas. What comes to mind when I think of this week's effort is downstream. Downstream from the burn areas of the largest fires in Colorado history is the drinking water supply for northern Colorado. An urgent effort is starting now to try and prevent erosion into the rivers, the streams, the mountain reservoirs. So, the fires strip away all the vegetation that holds the hillsides in place. If they come down in spring and summertime rains, then that's not only a danger to the people nearby, it's a real threat to the water supply for northern Colorado. If you text the word thanks to 303-871-1491, we'll shoot you the link to donate, or you can find that link wherever you find Next online. The funds specifically for watershed protection in northern Colorado are being collected again this week by the Community Foundation of Northern Colorado. They've been around for a long time. In addition to my weekly match of the first 50 gifts of $5 from 50 of you, the foundation received a $5,000 anonymous donation to get us rolling this week, funding that urgent erosion control work needed in the burn areas. You came through first for the fire evacuees, then you came through again for the people who lost their homes and businesses. Now it's our chance together to protect the Coloradans who need a safe supply of drinking water in the years to come. President Trump got 1.2 million votes in Colorado. Wolves got 1.4 million votes. They weren't running against each other. That would have been kind of wild. While we know that President Trump lost here, we're still not sure about the Wolves. And after a summer of protests in our state, voters make more changes to our criminal justice system. New prosecutors with new plans. Next. Justice, they say, is blind, and it is also increasingly blue in Colorado. Voters picked more progressive prosecutors on Election Day, including one in a county that hasn't had a Democratic district attorney in 28 years. Our Steve Steger talked with two new prosecutors about how they plan to change criminal justice in Colorado.
In the research I did, I think this is the first time a Democrat has won this seat, and the last time a Democrat even ran was 1992.
Gordon McLaughlin will be the next DA in Colorado's 8th Judicial District, covering Larimer and Jackson counties. He'll replace Republican term-limited DA Cliff Rydell.
Folks didn't know who their DA was. They didn't know what the DA did. They didn't know the powers that the DA had or the discretion that the DA had.
But something changed this year, McLaughlin said. People started paying attention to the office more, and the calls for something different got louder.
I think it says that Colorado is ready for fresh perspectives on a lot of these things.
I do think that people are taking just a greater interest in who their prosecutors are.
That seems to also be the case in Jefferson County, where Democrat Alexis King beat her Republican challenger in a race to replace Republican term-limited DA Pete Weir. You have to wonder if races like this reflect the demands for police reform we saw all summer.
I don't know if it's a referendum. We still need law enforcement to be doing their jobs. We still need law enforcement to bring cases. We need their expertise.
These new chief prosecutors do believe voters sent a clear message about change in how people are punished.
Our jail population should really be for folks who are dangerous, but not for folks who are really dealing with issues around poverty, mental illness, and addiction.
I think people want new ideas and want folks to challenge the status quo and want people to be solving problems in new and innovative and pragmatic ways.
For Next, I'm Steve Steger.
There is one district attorney's race that is a lot closer than expected. It's the race to replace Republican George Brockler in the 18th Judicial District, Douglas County and surrounding. Democrat Amy Padden now leads the Republican John Kellner by 49 votes. That's within the range for an automatic recount, though there are some ballots still to be verified and counted. Denver decriminalized mushrooms before pit bulls, but now the dogs are legal to own. Almost. Pit bulls in Denver won't have to contend with the wolves that Coloradans may or may not force into areas west of the divide. That fight over wolves still isn't finished 24 hours after the polls closed. Hinsdale County, Colorado loves itself some Kanye West. Or at least loves Kanye more than the rest of Colorado, statistically speaking. That is where Kanye West's inexplicable presidential bid won its highest percentage of the vote in Colorado. 0.63% in Hinsdale County. In Colorado's most remote spot, that came out to a whopping 4 votes for Kanye. Denver's dropping its 30-year pit bull ban by a 2-to-1 vote of the people last night. Starting next year, folks in Denver can legally own up to 2 pit bulls if they get a permit from the city. The dogs are technically still illegal to own in Denver for the next 2 months.
Until January, the current law still is in effect, and so if we evaluate a dog as being a pit bull until January, it's still illegal to be here, and so we'd be expecting them to remove the dog temporarily, and then come January they can apply for their permit and have the dog back in their home.
Denver's pit bull permits will cost $30 per pet. If they have no issues for 3 years, then no need to renew the permit. Not sure about wolf permits at this point. Colorado's ballot measure to reintroduce wolves to northwest Colorado still too close to call. 50.1% for it, 49.9% against it, our closest statewide ballot issue. The county-by-county breakdown shows a lot of people in urban areas are voting to stick wolves into rural areas that voted against the idea. I mean, look at the map. Wolves are not about to get dropped into City Park in Denver, but Denver loves the idea. Green means go, red means stop. No, please, no wolves. They're not going to be howling from the Flatirons in Boulder, but Boulder's on board with the idea. You look west of the divide, where farmers and ranchers would actually have to contend with the wolves, and they were not so hot on the idea. Your generosity for Colorado's wildfire victims has people talking. I'm serious. People are interested in what you are pulling off. $700,000 raised in 2 weeks' time, and a new idea tonight on how we can protect our neighbors up there for years to come. Your generosity to help Colorado's wildfire victims recently has just been amazing. $700,000 donated through your Word of Thanks campaign. So this week we're kicking off a new effort to protect northern Colorado's drinking water. The burn areas from the state's 2 largest fires on record are primed right now for mudslides and erosion, right down into the rivers, creeks, and the reservoirs, the places that provide drinking water to our neighbors. Text word thanks to 303-871-1491, and I'll shoot you that link to donate. As always, I'll match the first 50 donations of $5, and the Community Foundation of Northern Colorado is kicking it off with a $5,000 anonymous donation. Let's come through for our neighbors once more. We're getting some feedback tonight from Brian, who objected to my analysis of the Colorado Republican Party at a low point for power since the 1930s. Brian wrote in, after last night's comments by Kyle Clark, I will no longer be watching Channel 9. Brian, I understand the frustration of Colorado Republicans, and I understand the simplicity of blaming the party's recent implosion on the guy in your TV. I'm not sure that's accurate or productive. It probably just serves as a distraction for the people who actually ran your party into the ground in recent years. And if your goal is a healthy and successful Republican Party in Colorado, and that's a good goal, I can pretty much guarantee you that TV man bad is a losing strategy for a party that has turned losing into an art form. We'll see you next time.